Hello, everyone. My name is Alison Langerak-Tuzo. I'm the director of ARIS, the Archive for Research in Archetypal Symbolism. And I'd like to welcome you to this third event in season 2 of our Gaia, Then and Now, the Mythopoetics of Climate Change series. We've been doing this series for the past year or so, and we are very excited to welcome Jules Cashford to present again today. She started the entire series off with her excellent films, Gaia and The Return of Gaia. By the way, if you missed any of those or any of the events in the series, or you want to revisit any of them, we encourage you to check them out on the events page on aris.org. They're really excellent and a beautiful foundation for this series. In addition to presenting her films, Jules has also assisted in moderating a few of the presentations. Most recently, she moderated our event with Stephen Harding. I think it's pretty safe to say that we couldn't have done this series without Jules Cashford, and we feel very lucky to be able to welcome her again today to present her film, The Eleusinian Mysteries. Before we get to Jules and the film, a few things about today's event. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button. Feel free to use that to ask questions at any time during the event. And at the end of the presentation, we will have just a little bit of time to take some questions. Now I will give you some background on Jules. Jules Cashford studied philosophy at St. Andrews University and received a Carnegie Fellowship for postgraduate research in literature at Cambridge, where she was a tutor in tragedy for Trinity College. She then trained in Jungian analysis with the Association of Jungian Analysts in London and taught mythology. Her books include The Myth of the Goddess, Evolution of an Image, which she co-authored, The Moon, Symbol of Transformation, a translation of the Homeric hymns for Penguin Classics, The Mysteries of Osiris, and a novel called The Crane Dance. She was co-editor with Tom Singer and Craig Sanroque of the Ancient Greece Modern Psyche series. She's made 2 films on Jan van Eyck and 3 films on Gaia. Gaia, Mother Goddess Earth of Ancient Greece, The Return of Gaia, and the Eleusinian Mysteries, which we will see today. Jules serves as a trustee for the Gaia Foundation, an environmental nonprofit. Welcome, Jules. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Alison. The generous welcome you give everyone. Just to say hello to everyone, thank you very much for coming. And we're going to go straight in because it's a little longer than usual, 1 hour, 20 minutes almost. And I do hope you enjoy it and we can have time for questions afterwards. So we'll go straight in. The Eleusinian Mysteries in Ancient Greece. This is Eleusis with the Plutonaean cave in the background. Twice a year, in spring and autumn, people came from all over Greece to Eleusis, a sanctuary overlooking the sea, 12 miles from Athens. And they had been coming there for almost 2,000 years, from around 1500 BC until the 4th century AD, when the mysteries were closed down by the Christian emperor Theodosius in 393 AD. And later the temples were sacked by the Goths. But there is much left behind. Statues and paintings, writings from Greeks, Plato, Sophocles, Pindar, Plutarch and Pausanias, and later Romans such as Cicero and Apuleius. And even early Christians came to the ceremonies before they were prescribed. The Eleusinian Mysteries belong to an ancient tradition whose traces in art, etymology and custom reach far back to the Mycenaeans and Minoans in Crete, and still earlier to the Neolithic rituals of old Europe. A mystery tradition was also found across the sea in ancient Egypt. Herodotus, the Greek historian who had travelled to Egypt in the 5th century BC and seen the mysteries of the dying and resurrected god Osiris, believed that the Eleusinian Mysteries originated in Egypt. And the classicist Jane Harrison comments that in Cretan Mycenaean civilization, and only there, is seen that strange blend of Egyptian and Pelasgian that haunted Plutarch and made him say that Osiris was one with Dionysus, Isis with Demeter. The Mycenaeans were just one of the many waves of Indo-European tribes who came from the northern shores of the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, arriving in Crete around 2000 BC and coming to Greece around 800 BC. Here's a Mycenaean cup called the Harvesters, 1500 BC. They became known primarily as the Achaeans, after the Achaea region of Greece, the most northern part of the Peloponnese. And this is what Homer calls them when he speaks of them elegiacally in the Odyssey and the Iliad. Their chief divinity was the god Zeus. Ancient Greek myth is a fusion of the god-oriented culture of the new arrivals and the indigenous goddess culture long existing in Crete and Greece. In Greece there were already 3 different stories of origin: the Pelasgian, the Homeric, and the Orphic, all beginning with a mother goddess arising out of darkness, sea, or chaos, who then unites with a serpent or dances with the wind, and from their union the world comes into being. The fusion of the 2 cultural traditions, the native European and the immigrant Indo-European, allowed an entirely new narrative voice to appear, one where the timeless images of the ancient goddess cultures could be explored through the narrative of story, inspired by characters belonging to a particular time and place. Hesiod, writing around 730 BC, is the earliest poet to imagine the unfolding stages of creation, in his poem Theogony, the genealogy of the gods. In the new creation myth called Olympian, after Mount Olympus, now the home of the gods and the closest place to heaven, chaos is first, and then comes Gaia, Earth, who gives birth to all the forms that are to come. After an invocation to the Muses, he begins, "Chaos was first of all, but next appeared broad-breasted Earth, sure standing place for all the gods who live on snowy Olympus' peak. Gaia, as the first to arise from chaos, is then the one who embodies a cosmos, meaning in Greek an ordering, a harmonious whole. From chaos comes Nyx, night, and Erebus, darkness, who unite to bring forth day and space. As though independent of these more abstract structuring principles, Gaia then gives birth out of herself to Uranos, sky, Aurea, mountains, and Pontos, sea. Transforming her son Uranos into her lover, in the widespread tradition of son lovers of the goddess, Gaia gives birth to the next generations of divinities, called the Titans. 6 goddesses and 6 gods, among whom were Rhea, the flowing one, Themis, law, Mnemosyne, memory, and finally Kronos, time. Here's Rhea giving Kronos a baby, wrapped in swaddling clothes. Demeter's mother was Rhea, and her father was Kronos. Her brothers were Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, ruling the three realms of sky, sea, and underworld. And her sisters were Hestia, goddess of the hearth, and Hera, goddess of women and family, who became the wife of Zeus. Demeter conceived her daughter, Kore or Persephone, with Zeus. Demeter's name comes from a fusion of Meter, meaning mother, and the Greek word da, a Doric form of Gaia, meaning earth, making her the Earth Mother, and also the Cretan word for barley grains, Dai. So in Olympian myth, Demeter, Gaia's granddaughter, is the mother of Earth in her role of transforming the fruits of Gaia into food for human beings and animals alike. Her festivals were celebrated at the changing of the seasons, in spring and autumn, the time of the dying and the rebirth of the grain. Demeter's daughter has two names, as though one for the upper world, Kore, and the other for the underworld, Persephone. Kore means both maid and young shoot, and is resonant of the Greek choros, the dancing floor, which was also the threshing floor. Persephone means she who threshes the corn, bringer of death, and also she who sees in the dark. Demeter's story of the loss, finding and reunion with her daughter guided the rituals to their ultimate epiphany of rebirth for goddess, plant and human beings alike. Demeter comes to life in the poetry of Hesiod and Homer. In Homer's Iliad, she is drawn as the ripened corn. When golden Demeter, blowing with the wind, sifts the chaff from the grain on the sacred threshing floor. Yet both Homer and Hesiod point to a much older Demeter, and this allows us to see through the layers of myth, which lead back into the past. Once the Mycenaean bee language was interpreted in the 1950s, it was clear that Demeter, among many other Greek deities, came from Crete in the Mycenaean age, around 1500 BC, bringing her name, her daughter Persephone, and her traditional stories with her. Here we see the mother goddess seated beneath the tree of life, 1500 BC. This is an early Mycenaean version of the story of death and rebirth. The mother goddess, seated on the right beneath a tree full of fruits, holds up 3 poppies, while the little figure before her, the daughter figure, holds out a flower or shoot beneath the double axe, the Minoan and Mycenaean symbol of wholeness. The broken lines beneath her signify that she has come up from the underworld. The sun and waxing crescent moon are united above. On the left of the seal is a row of skulls, signifying that the movement of the seal is from death to life. And the 2 other women coming to pay homage are also moving towards the mother on the right, while another small figure behind the mother gathers fruit from the tree of life. And here, 200 years later, is a fresco of the Mycenaean Demeter holding up 2 ears of corn, Another archaic legend has Zeus taking the form of a serpent to unite with his daughter Persephone in a Cretan cave, and the child of their union was Dionysus. The Greek Plutarch, who was a temple priest at Delphi and had travelled to Egypt to witness the mysteries of Osiris, writes as late as the 2nd century AD that the dead were always known as Demeter's people, Demetrioi. This puts Demeter much closer in feeling to the Neolithic agriculturalists, for whom death was a taking back into Mother Earth to receive the treasure of regeneration, and not, as portrayed at the end of the Odyssey, a cavernous place where souls flit about in the dark, like homeless bats, separated from the human community. Early depictions of Demeter and Persephone are still evocative of this ancient tradition. Two images from around 600 BC reflect the original feeling between mother and daughter as a pattern of union, loss, and reunion. They were called the Demetres, the two goddesses, as though the daughter Kore, the sprout, were the new form of the mother Demeter, the plant, and both were essentially one. In this united figure, the one goddess is shown as two in one, not as two states which are generally opposed, but as two aspects of one whole, above and below, living and dead, not polarized, but joined at the root. It is this that expresses the idea of rebirth. And here, in this chariot ride of the two goddesses, at one with their horses, the joyous energy of sovereignty radiates from Demeter and Persephone, inviting us to participate in the exuberance of rebirth. Demeter's ancient origins were disclosed when the songs from the oral tradition were finally written down, around 700 BC, as the Homeric hymns. So much of our understanding of the mysteries in Eleusis comes from a close reading of the long hymn to Demeter in the Homeric hymns, one of the oldest hymns, and it begins with the drama of Persephone's descent into Hades. Demeter, thick-haired Demeter, awe-inspiring goddess, I shall now sing. She and her daughter with the slender feet, whom Idoneus seized away, and loud thundering, far-seeing Zeus sanctioned it. Far away from Demeter, with her golden sword and her glorious harvests, the daughter was playing with the deep-breasted daughters of Oceanus. They were gathering flowers, roses and crocuses and beautiful violets in a soft meadow. There were irises and hyacinths and a narcissus, which Gaia grew as a snare for the flower-like girl. For Zeus willed it, and he who received so many wanted it, and the flower shone wondrously. Everyone who saw it was amazed, immortal gods as well as mortal men. From its roots there grew 100 blooms, which had a scent so sweet that all the wide heaven above, and all the earth, and all the salt swelling of the sea, laughed aloud. And then the girl too wondered at it. She reached out her hands to take this thing of such delight. But the earth with wide paths gaped in the plain of Nicaea, and he who accepts so many, the Lord, sprang upon her with his immortal horses, that son of Kronos with many names. He caught hold of her, protesting, and he took her away, weeping, in his chariot of gold. Then she screamed in a shrill voice, calling for her father, son of Kronos, the most powerful and best. But no one, not the immortal gods nor mortal men, no one heard her voice, not even the olive trees heavy with fruit. So although she resisted, the ruler of many and receiver of many, the brother of her father, for Zeus had advised it, drove his immortal horses on, that son of Kronos with many names. Yet the goddess, as long as she could see the earth and the sparkling sky and the fast-flowing sea full of fishes and the light of the sun, and as long as she still hoped to look upon her dear mother and the tribe of gods who live forever, then that hope charmed her great heart in spite of her grief. And the peaks of the mountains and the depths of the sea echoed with her immortal voice, and her queenly mother heard her. A sharp pain seized her heart. With her lovely hands she tore the veil from her long ambrosial hair. She let fall her dark blue cloak from off her shoulders, and like a solitary wild bird, she streaked out across dry land and sea, searching. But no one wanted to tell her the truth, neither the gods nor mortal men, and not even one true messenger of the birds of omen came back to her. Pain, sharper still and yet more savage, came into her heart. Outraged with the son of Kronos, shrouded in dark clouds, she withdrew from the company of gods and from high Olympus. And she went to the cities of men and their rich fields, disguising her form for a long time. And no one who saw her knew her, no man or deep-breasted woman, until she came to the house of Celeus, lord of fragrant Eleusis. Saddened in her heart, she sank down near the wayside of the maiden well, where the citizens came to draw water. She sat in the shade, and branches of an olive tree grew overhead. And she was like an old woman, full of her years, cut off from childbearing and the gifts of Aphrodite, lover of garlands. She was like the nurses of the children of kings who deal justice, or like the housekeepers in their echoing halls. Abbreviating now, Demeter is taken in to the house of Celeus to be a nurse to the baby of Queen Astarte. Every night, Demeter gives the baby her immortal breast to suck and places him in the fire to make him immortal. But one night his mother peeps through the door and screams, and the spell is broken. Demeter, enraged, reveals herself as a goddess. She then proposes to teach them her mysteries, implicitly suggesting that because the child may no longer become immortal, her mysteries will be inaugurated instead. So she initiates the king of Eleusis, and especially Triptolemus, his son, into her mysteries, and also into the art of agriculture, which Triptolemus was then to impart to the rest of the world, riding in his chariot of snakes. So instead of immortality, Demeter offers them a way of understanding death and the idea of rebirth. And what she gives them, instead of a miracle, is a vision. On the left, Demeter, in a gown covered with animals and flowers, and carrying a torch and 3 ears of corn, stands behind Triptolemus. Triptolemus, seated in the winged chariot, is preparing for his journey to take the gift of corn to the people. In his right hand he holds a shallow dish, and in his left hand a stalk with 5 ears of corn, while reaching out to Persephone to receive her blessing. Persephone, in a gown patterned with dark snakes, also carrying a torch, stands before him, smiling, about to pour the sacred libation. A serpent winds through the wheel of his chariot, almost hidden inside the vast wing rising up backwards from the wheel. Behind Persephone stands a figure who is veiled as a mysti and is called Eleusis, the name of the sacred place of the mysteries. In her snake-like right hand she raises a flower and points to her mouth, as though reminding the participants that nothing of the rituals may be spoken. Another stele shows a rather different Triptolemus. His name means the threefold warrior, and also he who pounds the husks, suggestive of an earlier warrior culture becoming agricultural. Demeter's act of placing the ear of corn in his hand, and Persephone's stylized and elongated finger touching his head, might suggest that this is also an act of initiation into the mysteries at Eleusis. If that is so, it would alert us to the fact that the distinction we now usually make between the seed that is sown in the earth and the seed of illumination in the heart belongs to a later mode of thinking, one which, since the late 17th century, has progressively withdrawn spirit from nature, implicitly opposing them. It may be that one of the experiences of the Eleusinian Mysteries is a unified vision, such that Triptolemus, who teaches the world how to plough the seed and harvest the corn, and Triptolemus, the initiate of the mysteries, are ultimately one and the same. It was found in Eleusis, and so would have been intrinsic to the ceremony of the mysteries. Briefly, back to the hymn. Demeter's rage has turned the whole earth barren, and Zeus, receiving no offerings at all, sends Hermes the messenger down to Hades to bring Persephone back to her mother. But, as we know, not before Hades has slipped her the pomegranate seeds. There is a moving passage towards the end, when Persephone first sees her mother again in the upper world, and her mother says, "My child, tell me, you did not, did you, eat any food while you were below? If you did not, then you are free from loathsome Hades. But if you did, you will have to go back again to the secret depths of the earth and live there for a third part of the seasons of the year." So Demeter's own daughter will have to return to the underworld every year, bringing winter to the earth until her 3 months are ended, when she is reunited with her mother as spring. It is Hermes, Psychopompos, the god who crosses the thresholds and guides the souls, whom Zeus calls to bring Persephone back to the upper world. In the Homeric hymn to Hermes, Zeus had made Hermes the only consecrated messenger to Hades, the only one who could go between the worlds. And at the end of the Odyssey, Hermes also accompanies the souls of the vanquished suitors out of life. Now we come to the Thesmophoria. Here's Kore with rivulets of the water of life falling from her gown. Found at Eleusis. The mysteries at Eleusis grew out of a much older autumn festival dedicated to Demeter at the time of the sowing of the seed, which celebrated her role as law-bearer or lawgiver, Demeter Thesmophoros. Thesmos means what is laid down, while phoria means carrying. The rites were attended only by women, and the essential feature was the pig sacrifice, who were themselves literally laid down in deep chasms beneath the earth, suggesting that Greece was being transformed from a nomadic into an agricultural community under the sacred law of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, who also, as it were, inaugurated the new conditions of settled life and civilized law. The festival was held in the month of October, in the 3 days dark of the moon, and was widespread throughout Greece. The first day was called the Katharos and the Anados, the way down and the way up. Firstly, when the pigs were let down into deep clefts of chasms filled with snakes, called Megara. And secondly, when the decomposed remains of the pig sacrificed the previous year were brought up. The second day was called Nestia, fasting, when the women fasted, sitting on the ground, reenacting Demeter's grief for the loss of Persephone, when she sat desolate by the well. Plutarch writes that the Boeotians called the Thesmophoria the festival of sorrow. The mood was gloomy, and no garlands were worn. On the third day, a banquet of meat took place. The rotten flesh was scattered on the fields to fertilize them, and the goddess of beautiful birth, Gaia, was invoked. The fair birth of the crops and the fair-born goddess were both daughters of Earth's renewal, belonging to the same reality, and so emerging as one and the same. This is Demeter of Eleusis holding the Eleusinian torch, giving her blessing to any autos, whose name written above his head means year, the lawful year god, also known as Plutos, the fruits of earth. He gazes back at her as though to thank her for the gift of wheat sprouting from his cornucopia. Now we come to the Eleusinian Mysteries. The purpose and meaning of the mysteries of Eleusis was initiation into a vision. Eleusis itself means the place of happy arrival, from which the Elysian fields take their name, and is also the root of the Greek word for freedom, eleftheria. The term mysteries comes from the word muine, which means to close, both eyes and mouth, and referred first to the secrecy surrounding the ceremonies, but more significantly to the closure required of the initiate, that he or she allow their senses, their habitual responses, to be closed, so they may be open to whatever happens, to something unknown before, or to something beyond the senses, perhaps. So the term takes on the secondary meaning to initiate. The culmination of the ceremony was a showing forth of sacred objects in the inner sanctuary by the high priest or hierophant. Hierophinon, literally, he who makes the sacred objects appear. Nothing but allusions to what took place were permitted on pain of death. What could be said was simply that Demeter found and met with her daughter at Eleusis. Only Christian writers violated these rules, and while their testimony may have had its own bias, a Gnostic writer describes the high point of the ceremony as the cutting of an ear of corn in silence. Anyone could attend the mysteries, provided they could speak Greek and had not shed the blood of another, pointing to the moral dimension of the festival. The lesser mysteries took place towards the end of winter, round February, in the month of flowers, the anthesterion, and were a condition for entry into the greater mysteries, which took place in autumn. In the lesser mysteries, the theology of the two goddesses was explained, and also the meaning of the mystery rites. Clement of Alexandria, a Christian theologian and philosopher who taught in Alexandria in the 3rd century AD, wrote that the mysteries of the Greeks begin with purification. There are the lesser mysteries, which have a function of teaching and preparation for the mysteries to come, and the greater mysteries, which concern everything, where it is no longer a matter of learning, but contemplating and pondering nature and concrete realities. A glimpse into the lesser mysteries is given through a series of sculptures known as the Purification of Heracles. Heracles was the hero of the 12 labours, who had indeed shed blood many times, and so strictly was not eligible for the mysteries. However, a dispensation was made for him on condition that he undergo certain rituals necessary for initiation. And this gives us an insight into the original rituals for all the participants that were otherwise secret. There were 3 stages of purification, carved into a large marble burial urn, known as the Lovatelli urn, found in a grave on the Aquiline Hill in Rome. The first stage of the initiation into the lesser mysteries was the sacrifice of a young pig, the animal sacred to Demeter, as in the Thesmotheria. But here was to become a symbol of the initiate's own death, the death of the person he or she was before. Here's Heracles in a lion skin sacrificing his pig, while a priest holds a dish of poppy heads and pours water upon the sacrifice. The second stage of the initiation was a ceremony of purification, known as the lycnophoria, in which the initiate's eyes were covered. Heracles, veiled and blindfolded, is here seated on a stool covered with a ram fleece, following the example of Demeter in the hymn. His right foot rests upon a ram's head, a symbol of the fleece of purification. Over his head from above, the priestess holds a lycnon, a winnowing fan, used in the cult of Dionysus to separate the wheat from the chaff, symbolizing the work of the initiate to separate what was of value from what was not, while a torch is brought up close to him from below. This is the final stage of initiation, shown here in a terracotta reproduction of the original Lovateli vase. Demeter, in the centre, is seated on the kiste, the sacred basket, which holds the ritual implements of the greater mysteries. She is turning to face her daughter Persephone, still carrying her torches from the underworld. A great snake lies in Demeter's lap, coiling around her. The new initiate, carrying his bundle of twigs, is holding out his right hand and touching the head of the snake without fear. It is significant that Demeter is not watching or guiding him, as though the final stage of initiation belongs only to the initiates. This initiate may even be Heracles himself, since there was a tradition that Heracles was initiated at the lesser mysteries in Agra. Here is the Ninian tablet. This unique tablet depicts elements of the Eleusinian Mysteries, dating back to the 4th century BC. A distinctive row of moons frames the ceremony, following the cycle from crescent to full, waning death and rebirth, offering a path and meaning to the initiate's progress taking place beneath them. Above the moons, the musicians are playing to the participants of the nocturnal rituals below. There is an inscription on the base of the tablet, which is dedicated to the 2 goddesses, by a woman called Ninion, who may herself also be represented in the drama. This is the only known representation of the initiation rites of the mysteries, possibly divided into an upper and lower half. The 2 goddesses are the slightly larger figures on the right, Demeter above and Persephone below, both seated on the sacred kiste, the box where the secrets were hidden. Hecate above and Iacchos Dionysus below, both holding 2 torches, are leading the procession of initiates who are being welcomed by the goddesses. All the participants are crowned and hold flowering branches and staves. The women have the sacred kykeon vessels fixed upon their heads, while the men hold tiny pitchers in their hands in honour of Iacchos Dionysus, who led the mystics in their dance. In the lower tier, between Iacchos and Persephone, is the omphalos, the centre of the world, with a cross of myrtle branches beneath it. Harrison suggests that the lower tier represents the first initiation of Ninion, the dancing figure in white, into the lesser mysteries at Agra in spring, which were sacred to Persephone. In the upper tier, a figure, also in white, with strikingly similar features, and her right arm outstretched in the same gesture, is being initiated into the greater mysteries at Eleusis in autumn, which were sacred to Demeter, seated on the right. This suggests that every candidate was initiated twice, first with Persephone and then with Demeter. Perhaps another way of understanding Demeter and Persephone as one whole. The greater mysteries were held originally every 5 years, and later every year in autumn, beginning at the full moon on the 15th of the month of Boedromion, which was September, and lasting 9 days. Here's the great cave at Eleusis, seen from the lesser Propylaea, a small gateway in the sanctuary of Demeter and Persephone. Initiates came from all over the Hellenic and Roman world, and a truce between the Greek city-states was declared for 55 days, from the month preceding to the month afterwards. On the day before the opening, the Hiera, the sacred objects of Demeter, were taken by procession from Eleusis to Athens. The first day was the summoning and preparation of the initiates, and the second day was the cleansing of the initiates in the sea, called the banishing, together with the sacrifice of the piglets by the initiates themselves. The third day was an official sacrifice on behalf of the city of Athens, a day of fasting concluded by the drinking of the special drink, the kykeon. The fourth day, called the Asclepia, in honour of Asclepios, god of healing, was a further day of purification. Here is Asclepius and his snake, healing the dreamer. On the right of the tablet, a snake, rising as though out of the dreaming boy's own body, touches his right shoulder. A helper is watching over him. On the left of the tablet, the boy has awakened in his dream and stands before the god, who touches his shoulder in the same place. A healing of both body and soul. The fifth day, known as Iakos, was the day of celebration, when a great procession from Athens to Eleusis took place along the sacred way, a distance of around 12 miles. Priestesses carried the Hera in closed kista, chests and baskets, surrounded by crowds dancing, singing and shouting ecstatically the name of Iakos, whose statue, crowned with myrtle and bearing a torch, stood upright in a carriage. Iakos, known as lover of the dance, was another form of Dionysus, that child of Persephone and Zeus in his dancing mode, god of poetry, wine and song, and the thrill of excitement. This was also the mystical Dionysus, a dying and resurrecting lunar god, described as leading the chorus of the stars, whose breath is fire. A stone stele found at Delphi adds, When you went to the vales of Eleusis, to the holy mysteries, to save mortals from their pains, you opened a haven without toils. This was also a sign that the Eleusinian and the Dionysian mysteries had come together. Here's Dionysus offering a cup of wine to Demeter or Persephone, seated on her throne holding an ear of wheat. At the boundary between Athens and Eleusis, the procession was mocked by masked figures, enacting the myth in the Homeric hymn that Iambe or Baubo had cheered up Demeter by making her laugh, and so, like many other festivals of renewal, mocking the old to make way for the new. When the stars came out, the Mysti broke their fast as the 20th day of the month had arrived. According to Aristophanes' frogs, the rest of the night was spent in singing and dancing. The temples of Poseidon and Artemis were open to all. Behind them lay the gate to the sanctuary, which none but the initiates might enter on pain of death. The 6th day was a day of resting, fasting, purification and sacrificing, following the myth of Demeter's fast and enacting the ritual of winter's barrenness. And the fast was broken by the same drink she had requested, the kykeon, her own sacred drink. In the outer courtyard of the telesterion, the Mysti danced all through the night, singing hymns to the goddess, dancing her into being. Aristophanes writes of this: the mystics are dancing and celebrating on a meadow full of flowers. On the morning of the 7th day, the initiates were allowed into the closed sanctuary of the telesterion, the hall of initiation. At the entrance to the telesterion were 2 large caryatids, 2 sculpted female figures who take the place of a column or pillar, serving as guardians to a sacred place and an invitation to the treasures within. This caryatid is carrying the Kiste Mystica, the mystic chest, upon her head. In the centre, the fluted vessel holding the kykeon is adorned with poppies, and 2 larger circles of poppies cluster on either side. Above this is a bundle of bound myrtle branches. The name of the telesterion draws on the verb teleo, to initiate, and the noun telos, the goal. This was a huge building which could hold several thousand people, all watching the demonstration of the sacred objects at the same time. It had a skylight for letting out the smoke that came from the enormous fire under which the Hierophant stood. In the centre was the anaktoron, meaning the royal house or the inner sanctuary, a rectangular stone construction with a door at the end, which only the Hierophant was permitted to pass through. A fire burned on top of the anaktoron. Otherwise it was dark, until a sudden flash of light appeared when the Hierophant emerged to the sound of a loud gong. So what do we know of what happened in this, the beginning of the actual initiation? It seems to have taken place in 3 stages. The dromina, the things done, the legomena, the things said, the deichneumena, the things shown. There followed a special ceremony known as the apoptaia, the state of having seen, only for those initiated the previous year. In the Dromina, the initiates participated in a sacred pageant, which reenacted the story of Demeter and Persephone, living through the feelings of sorrow, rage, and rejoicing, carrying torches in the darkness to the sound of music and singing. Clement of Alexandria writes that Demeter and Kore have come to be the subject of a mystic drama, and Eleusis celebrates with torches the abduction of the daughter and the sorrowful wanderings of the mother. It was also believed that the Mystae themselves experienced a journey to the underworld through wandering in the dark in the lower part of the telesterion. It seems that the initiates had to relinquish their own personal sense of who they were and willingly suffer the terrors of death with their own raw instincts as a condition of initiation. They had, in a sense, to become Demeter and Persephone themselves. It was even told that there was once a cave called the Temple of Hades, which signified the way to the underworld, whose entrance was an omphalos, like the navel of the world in Delphi. From that place prophecies were uttered that could not be altered. The Roman Apuleius, who had travelled to Egypt and was himself an initiate of the mysteries of Isis, writes in his tale, The Golden Ass, that initiation involved a voluntary death before the other life was possible. Plutarch expands on this. At first there is wandering and wearisome roaming, and fearful travelling through darkness with no end to be found. Then there is every sort of terror, shuddering and trembling and perspiring and being alarmed. But after that, a marvellous light appears, and open places and meadows await, with voices and dances and the solemnities of sacred utterances and holy visions. In that place one walks about at will, now perfect and initiated and free. And wearing a crown, one celebrates religious rites and joins with pure and pious people. Excavations of the sanctuary have not revealed any actual underground chambers in which the Mystae could literally descend to the underworld. Is it possible, then, that the underworld may eventually have become a state of mind, brought about by a prolonged immersion in an atmosphere of darkness, blazing flame of a sudden fire, beating of gongs, a suffering of the terror of the unknown? Plutarch writes that to die is to be initiated, as a play on words, telutan equals telesthai, suggesting that it is by dying to the old that the new may appear. Only after this ordeal did the light return. And now the Mystaes are imagined as passing upwards to a vision of the joyous meadow of the Elysian fields, lit by a brilliant light. It may be that first enacting Demeter's search, becoming the mother who has lost her child, and then becoming the child who had lost her mother, identifying with Persephone's death, with sorrow and then with compassion, is consciously to experience the underworld of death, both of our loved ones and of ourselves. So when, later in the ceremonies, the shout goes up, "Kore is found!" perhaps Kore has now become all our loved ones and also ourselves, and this may be understood as a return from death into life. So the compassionate act of sharing deeply in Demeter's grief may have allowed that grief to transform into an understanding that brought joy. Aristotle, in a fragment, said that the initiates did not learn the mysteries, but experienced them, not mathine, but pathine, and that was why they were brought into a new state of being. The second stage of the ceremony, the legomena, consisted of short ritual invocations, more like comments accompanying the pageant and explaining the significance of the drama. This was followed by the deichnoumena, the showing of Hera, the sacred objects, culminating in a revelation by the Hierophant, which was forbidden to be told. Clement of Alexandria quotes an initiate as having said, "I fasted, I drank from the kykeon, I took out of the kiste, worked, placed back in the basket, and from the basket into the kiste." What was hidden in the chest and the basket has been the subject of much early Christian speculation. But the Greek writer Theophrastus suggests that corn-grinding tools were themselves held to be sacred. So it may have been a mortar and pestle that were hidden in the basket, the means of preparing the kykeon, which may itself have made possible a change in consciousness. Working in the basket might then imply the preparation of the drink that was itself a rite of transformation. The apopteia also contained the showing of sacred objects, the Hera. We do not know what the priest revealed, but we can wonder. Imagine the great hall of the mysteries, shrouded in darkness, thronged with people, waiting in stillness and silence. Dim figures of priests move in the darkness, carrying flickering torches. In the centre of the darkness, some secret drama is being performed. Suddenly a gong sounds like thunder. The underworld breaks open, and then, out of the depths of the earth, Kore appears. A radiant light fills the chamber, the huge fire blazes upwards, and the Hierophant chants, "The great goddess has borne a sacred child. Brimo has borne Brimos." Then, in the profound silence, he holds up a single ear of corn, cut from the stem. Now is the time for celebration. There is singing and dancing in the courtyard, a great bull is sacrificed, and all the people break their fast together. Finally, the priest fills 2 vessels, and lifting one to the west and the other to the east, he pours the contents of the vessels onto the earth. The people, looking up to heaven, cry, "Hie, rain," and looking down to earth cry, "Kie, conceive, hie, kie, hie, kie." So end the mysteries at Eleusis. So the culminating event of the mysteries was the sacred marriage of the heavenly rain with the receptive earth, which conceives the child of the grain. The poet Aeschylus also imagines what he calls these moist espousals in his play Danaïdes. The great and amorous sky curved over the earth and lay upon her as a pure lover. The rain, the humid flux descending from heaven, for both human and animal, for both thick and strong, germinated the wheat, swelled the furrows with fecund mud, and brought forth the buds in the orchards. The closest we have come to a glimpse back into the past is given by the 5th century AD philosopher Proclus, who was head of the Platonic Academy 15 years after the mysteries had been closed down. He knew the daughter of Nestorius, the last Eleusinian hierophant, and this is what she told him about the teletai, the rites of the mysteries. They cause sympathy of the souls with the ritual in a way that is unintelligible to us and divine, so that some of the initiations are stricken with panic, being filled with divine awe. Others assimilate themselves to the holy symbols, leave their own identity, become at home with the gods, and experience divine possession. Proclus himself concluded, on the whole, the initiation does not happen through intellection and judgment, but through the silence, which is unifying and is superior to every cognitive activity. Though, in the end, only a mystic understands the mysteries. Demeter and Persephone are here reunited. Persephone on the left, holding the Eleusinian torch, pours a libation onto the earth, while Demeter, crowned, holds the royal sceptre and a sheaf of wheat, in celebration of the new season and the mystery of the renewal of life. Many poets and philosophers wrote of their experience of the mysteries over the centuries. The Homeric hymn to Demeter ends, "Blessed are those of all the people on the earth who have seen these mysteries." Sophocles writes, "Thrice blessed are those mortals who have seen these rites and thus enter into Hades. For them alone there is life, for the others all is misery." Plato writes in his Phaedo, "Whoever arrives in Hades as an uninitiate and non-participant in the initiation rites will lie mud. But those who have been purified and have participated in the initiation rites will dwell with the gods." Two millennia later, it is difficult not to ask the question, what did they see? When Heracles says, "I have seen Kore," did he mean he saw an apparition, a phantasma? Or did he see with his mind's eye? Or we might ask, not what did they see, but how did they see? After the fasting, and especially perhaps after the drinking of Demeter's special potion, the Kykeon. It is significant that a password was required from those who were prepared to receive the initiation in the telesterion, and this was, "I have fasted, I have drunk the Kykeon," a word which literally means mixture. The two constant attributes of Demeter are poppies and ears of grain. The older Demeter in Crete, once seated beneath the tree of life holding 3 poppies, may have brought her poppies with her when she came to Greece. This is part of an ancient frieze believed to come from the city in Eleusis. Reading symbolically from right to left, beginning with the skull of a steer and ending with the crossed branches of the myrtle tree, the frieze may suggest how the mysteries themselves experience the stages of their own initiation. The steer's skull is dressed in garlands falling from his head, as though in sympathy and gratitude for his sacrifice, and suggesting perhaps an affinity between the sacred animal and the sacrifice the initiates will themselves have to make to be released into a world beyond the limitations of the ego. This leads to the next stage in the centre of the frieze, the Kykean cup. The Kykean cup, sculpted as a shell, evocative of the sea and the waters of life, is straddled across the threshold, its handles resting on the 2 outer columns, as though it were itself the source and guardian of the secrets to come. The panel on the left of the Kykean cup displays a large, thick outer circle, almost like a wheel, containing and perhaps also protecting a smaller circle of 8 poppy heads inside it, suggesting that this is the source of the vision made possible through the drinking of the Kykeon. The last panel to the left of the poppies is composed of myrtle branches and poppies intertwined. 2 large bundles of myrtle form a diagonal cross, the tips of their stems appearing like torches from the underworld. The evergreen myrtle tree was once seen as a plant of death and rebirth. It was sacred to Aphrodite, goddess of love, who was born from the foam when the genitals of Uranos, the sky god, were severed from Gaia by her son Kronos, time, and then thrown into the lap of the sea. Aphrodite then became the daughter of sky and sea. She was also the first child of the separation of earth and sky, which set life going, becoming herself implicitly the origin of nature, the first form of natural life, which grows and dies and is born again. 2 large poppies lie behind and across the myrtle in the centre, and an even larger 3rd poppy stands upright behind and between the myrtle heads above. This intricate relationship between the outer cross myrtles of Aphrodite and the inner cross poppies of Demeter may suggest a creative union between them. It is significant that the cup of the Kykeon is shaped as an intricately designed shell, recalling us to the original drama of the birth of Aphrodite from the foam, and suggesting that the Kykean drink draws us back into the origin of life, to contemplate the eternal essence of things. A cross of myrtle branches is also found beneath the omphalos, the centre of the world, in the lower tier of the Ninian tablet, placed between Persephone and Iacchos Dionysus, depicting the eternal beneath the flux of time. Myrtle and poppies also adorn the headdress of the caryatid standing in the entrance to the telesterion. And the Roman poet Ovid depicts Demeter putting Triptolemus to sleep with poppy juice. Prevalence of poppies in the remaining friezes suggests that the Kykeon contained opium. On the other hand, in the Homeric hymn to Demeter, the goddess specifically called for her own special drink of barley mixed with mint. This may also have contained a substance called ergot, which is a fungus that grows on barley and has alkaloids similar to LSD. Fragments of this have been found in a temple dedicated to the two Eleusinian goddesses in Girona, in Spain. The herb pennyroyal, considered by some to be a mild stimulant and by others a hallucinogen, may also have been mixed with the mint. Alternatively, Robert Graves, in his book Greek Myths, suggests that psilocybin mushrooms, often referred to as ambrosia and nectar, were the secret element of the Eleusinian and Dionysian mysteries, coming from Central and South America, along perhaps with ayahuasca. And the rituals of Dionysus were always celebrated with the grape of the vine, as in Euripides' play Dionysos. Aldous Huxley, in his book The Doors of Perception, points to his own experience of a profound change in consciousness brought about by mescaline, a derivative from the peyote cactus, and later LSD. This freed him from what he called the reducing valve of perception, our preoccupation with survival, trying to make sense of things through ideas and language alone, and released him unconditionally into mind at large, changing the way he saw the world. He writes, "In the final stage of egolessness, there is an obscure knowledge that all is in all, that all is actually each." Huxley speaks of what the American philosopher William James calls cosmic consciousness. The title of Huxley's book comes from William Blake. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. Yet still others have wondered if just the ordeals themselves, the many days of fasting, the rigour of the things said and done, the terror of the dark, the shock of the gong, the sudden blazing of the great flame, the increasing excitement of the community, the compassion for Demeter's loss, for the human condition, longing to become part of a mystery greater than ourselves, and the yearning to understand. Might this alone have urged the participants to see anew, to feel the ecstasy of a promised rebirth, even of oneself? Either way, it would seem that whatever the participants saw, they saw with such intensity that they united with what was seen, and so they experienced a totally different dimension of the psyche. To explore this further, we may turn briefly to the symbolism of the moon, which offers a further way of understanding the meaning of the rituals. Here, Persephone, on the left, is drawn as the new moon rising, with Hermes holding his caduceus, making possible the return from the underworld of darkness, with Hecate, goddess of the dark moon, lighting the way with her torches, and Demeter standing behind her with her flowering staff, waiting to embrace her daughter as herself. It is significant that the moon structured the timing of both the Thesmophoria and the Eleusinian festivals, and not just so they could see in the dark. The Eleusinian Mysteries were held in the last third of the month, in accordance with the lunar calendar. The 3 days celebration of the Thesmophoria, timed to the 3 days dark of the moon, follows precisely the dying and resurrecting phase of the lunar story. The new moon, returning after 3 days' death, is symbolically the child of the old moon, who begins to grow towards the full, as reunion with the mother, after which the waning moon diminishes back again into the dark. This pattern of life, death, and rebirth required for its understanding the essential Greek distinction between two meanings of the words for life, which were expressed as Zoe and Bios. Zoe is unmanifested, non-individualized, indestructible life, infinite life, while Bios is the manifest individual life in time, finite life, which comes forth from Zoe and returns to Zoe. In lunar terms, the invisible cycle of the moon was understood as Zoe, infinite life, out of which, as it were, the phases of the moon come forth and manifest themselves. The phases of the moon which we can see, the term phase coming from the Greek phainomai, to appear, are understood as bios, the visible, incarnated life in time, which lives and dies and returns to Zoe. Bios comes forth from Zoe as the manifestation of the cycle, or the moving image of eternity, as Plato puts it. In the festivals of Dionysus, where the drinking of the wine was sacred, the supplicants were said to drink the Zoe of the god, and so to become one with infinite life. The sequence of events in the mystery celebrations suggests that the culminating moment of the ceremony is the cry that Brimo has given birth to Brimos. The mother has given birth to her child. Brimo was an actual underworld goddess in Thessaly in the north, whose name means the mighty or the raging one. This is resonant of the rage of Demeter in the hymn, which turned the upper world barren and changed the mind of Zeus. Zeus then concedes to Demeter's demand to bring her daughter back, almost as though he is himself inaugurating the ritual cycle of death and rebirth, which of course had long preceded him as the rhythms of creation in the eternal womb of Gaia. A further resonance of meaning may be suggested through the drama of Demeter losing and finding Kore within herself, the two becoming one again, the sorrow and joy of endless renewal in the divine and the human alike. However it is understood, it seems possible that the participants of the mysteries were brought to see the child and the corn together as one, as living witness that in death is life. And perhaps the great goddess is not named, because in the moment of Epiphany, the two goddesses become one, and symbolically it is this momentous union that gives birth to the new vision that is the child. This would make sense of the culmination of the ceremony as the raising of the ear of corn in silence. It would be a vision of Zoe, infinite life, and Bios, finite life, as one.
Thank you so much for that, Jules. What a stunning film. It was an absolute treat to be able to live within those images for the past hour or so. Thank you so much for sharing the film with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we have a few questions have come in, which we should get to. Let's see. We have a question that says, can you talk a bit about how drugs were used to enhance the state of mind during the ceremonies? So much is made of the drinking of the kykeon. So can you talk about that for a second?
Yes, well, it's all speculation really, but the kykeon comes in so many different places that you get the feeling it, whatever it is something that takes you out of your everyday perception and releases you into a much deeper, wider place where all sorts of things come towards you and mean different things. And so you don't, as it were, run back to the things that you know safely. You've got a little courage to carry on being led by the priests into where they wish you to go. And this is like a number of people who take mescaline or pot or anything really, especially if it's done carefully, you do realize that you aren't bound by the abstract ideas in your mind, and you can start to feel nature as kin to us. It's like the division that we sometimes can't help but make between ourselves as humans and the whole of the universe and nature in particular. It dissolves. The kykeon, I imagine, is rather like what some or many of us have experienced at odd times, or even like with Dionysus, with wonderful wine, that divisions are broken down and our minds are open. And therefore, we go with the flow of everybody. Of course, you're in a great communion here. And each endorses each other, and there are safety rules. And so it isn't foolhardy like we might often be on our own. Mm-hmm. And that actually releases us from our habitual mode of thinking. I think that's the whole point of it, that we lose our closed ways of perceiving things.
And it seems the symbol of Demeter's poppies being so present give us a clue as to what maybe the ingredients were there.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of discussion as to whether it was opium or whether it wasn't. But there are poppies everywhere, really. And you can't get away from them. Demeter had it in everywhere she went, really. And also, of course, the priests took a very hard line on this. You could only have it when they gave it to you, and for as long as they gave it, and they knew their route, as it were. So mm-hmm. it's I think we've got that to add into any experience that any of us have had with wine or whatever. That's different. We're guided towards a goal. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so exciting, really, that they actually do break through into a place which encounters far more than they would have imagined that it would. I think that's the sense you get from it, or everyone all together, and no animosity, just sharing a goal on behalf of the wondrous earth, really.
This might lead into the next question quite nicely. What are your thoughts on why the participants kept coming back year after year?
Well, I think my thoughts are that it's so easy to lose that precision of mind and that almost ecstasy when we go back into our daily lives. And Huxley is very good on this, saying that the brain is a reducing valve of perception, the one that we use to survive and to think in abstract ideas. It doesn't instinctively allow us that fullness, which therefore, when we go back into, say, quotes, ordinary life, we tend to lose the memories. They go faint, don't they? Even with us, without mysteries, some beautiful valley we've seen, it loses its presence. And I think that they knew that it was okay to go back, and we needed to, because we can't help but be victims, really, of the reducing valve of perception. Even if we're aware of it, can go so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And we need reminding why people go to their religious services every Sunday, say, or whatever. I think we all need reminding. Such is the mind.
Yeah, indeed. You spoke a bit about, in the beginning, about there being a connection between Egypt and the Eleusinian Mysteries. I wonder if you could say a bit more about that.
Yes, well, of course, all Plato and all the main Greeks that we've heard of, they all went to Egypt to learn about the mysteries, which were, of course, much older, to probably 3000 BC. And you have the same, it's much more dramatic images, but you have the same death and rebirth ceremonies in Egypt, and where the god Osiris is brought back into life by the Isis, his wife, becoming a bird and fanning him into life, and then conceiving their son Horus from him, and who is, of course, the new plant of the new year and the new moon. So that the same understanding of that death is capable of rebirth if we understand it and if we act towards it in our minds. We see that these are in images, but they are also demonstrating to us truths of our deep inner nature, so that in all over the world, really, there were ceremonies in the dark of the moon, initially to bring the moon back, which they thought that we were necessary for. But even if we don't think that any longer, we still understand that those differences in ourselves, where we need reminding, where we need to have a rebirth from what we forget, where we go back into our daily selves and lose the magic. So it goes in all situations, but the Greeks learned an awful lot from the Egyptians, but of course they have their own way of understanding it.
And we have one more question. Are there any earlier precedents for this kind of thing seen in art?
Well, if you go to for example, the goddess of Lucelle, there's a wonderful statue of a goddess it's 20,000 BC. So we're going way back now. And actually, I've actually got one. This is also a goddess who is pregnant, and she's 1800. She's very close by. But they always understood the possibility of rebirth demonstrated with the moon, who it wasn't an it, obviously, who was reborn after the 3 days of darkness. And so you get, for example, in the goddess of Lucelle, you get the most wonderful carving in stone of a goddess enormously pregnant holding a half moon in her hand with 7 notches on it, which is the phase of the moon where it's active. And you know that in her pregnant belly is the moon to come in the next way of thinking, in the next month, as it were. And this is 20,000 BC. So it's like it's a tradition from looking upwards and seeing something change, which makes sense to our human condition. Whether its ultimate sense doesn't really matter. It's a symbol, and it's a symbol of rebirth all over the world.
That connection to the moon is just so meaningful in all of these instances.
Yes.
Well, I think unfortunately we're out of time and we have to wrap things up. Thank you so much, Jules, for this beautiful presentation, and thank you for sharing your film.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and I do hope
Yes.
you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Since we don't have a lot of time for questions, we want to continue the discussion in the Eris forum. So if you have questions that we didn't get to, please feel free to leave comments or reflections on the event in the forum, which is part of Archipelago, our outreach center on eris.org. And if any images came to mind during today's event, please send them to info@eris.org. And we have a gallery of Gaia images that we have on our site. We'd love to add your images there. And thank you so much for coming today. Our next event will be another presentation with Stephen Harding on June 4th. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much.